Yeah, clearly that's where the disruption is, and I don't think that chief digital officers see that yet as hitting their company, but it's that train coming down the tracks, we all know it, right? So I think you're right, 60% of chief digital officers either say that blockchain is somewhat important, or very important. And I think that's low. I think that should be 90, 95%, but there's a couple of infrastructural issues that can't be denied. A CDO gets hired at a company, they usually report to a CEO, they usually have a budget and a head count, and they have a strategy that they need to deliver, right? So that strategy doesn't always include a disruption that could happen in 3 years. It's usually what's already happening, right? How do we take a print publication and drag them into the digital economy? You know, what other assets can we build? What can we do with our subscription list? You know, all of those things that they're trying to answer to help pivot the company from print or whatever it might be to digital. So they have so much on their plate. I think that they're not being forward thinking enough to see what's coming down the train tracks. Blockchain is clearly the next major disruption, and the challenge that we have is, in the C-suite, there's a revolving door, you know? The chief marketing officer's title tenure on average is 2 years. I mean, that's crazy, you know, chief digital officer is 3 years to 5 years. So that says to me that a company is bringing in a chief digital officer. They want to go from A to Z, but they can only go from A to D or E or F just to get that company caught up, but then they're going to have to bring in somebody with new skill sets at stage E to get them further along their strategy evolution. So I see it as natural, but I don't think it makes me very uncomfortable to see my base. They should be a lot more aware of what's going on. And then I'll touch on the data side. But a good example on digital and why I think that disruption's happened. If you look at what Kodak announced with When Digital, right? And Kodak announced it a long time ago. There was a lot of crazy uproar in the marketplace. But essentially, if you just look at the core technology on blockchain that they're trying to deliver, let's track photography, right? And the intellectual property of somebody's photo that's being distributed all over the web. This would be a boon for every amateur photographer, for professionals, for National Geographic, et cetera, et cetera. But it also sets up the potential for any company that has video or photos or digital asset and tracking that intellectual property throughout the internet. That could mean Condé Nast, it could mean MTV, it could mean, you know, ESPN, but it could also mean YouTube and Pandora and Spotify, right? YouTube especially. So this means that blockchain, if this comes about and Kodak or whoever does it really well, this is going to be a massive disruption on the digital side that I think all incumbents need to look at. So that would be my answer on the digital. I don't know if you want to dig right into the data and why it's higher. They're deep in tech, right? So data has been the lifeblood of the online economy. So you see, they didn't always call them chief data officers, but there have always been chief data scientists at, you know, Netflix and Yahoo and Google and Microsoft and Salesforce. That's a given. So they've always been there. But the real spikes came in the hiring in around 2008, right after the world financial crisis. 2009, 2010, regulators stepped in globally and said, especially financial services company, you need more regulation, governance over your data, how it's used, and of course now we see GDPR and some of these other things that empower the individual. So I would say that if blockchain's first use case was crypto and Bitcoin, right? Isn't it only natural that those companies that are going to be disrupted by that would be not even companies, that would be the central banks, right? That would also be companies, financial services firms, American Express, big banks, JP Morgan Chase, et cetera, that anybody in those roles would obviously have to say, look, this disruption is not only coming, it's here. We need you to pay attention to this, and we need you to start acting on it. So it seems natural to me to think that if those were the sectors hiring chief data officers, and those are the ones being disrupted the most immediately by blockchain, that they would have it in their pipeline, you know, that's what they're targeted with. And it's across the board. It's not just, you know, they're playing around a little bit and making some minority investments. No, they're going full on. The companies have MVPs, they've got products out, they're doing joint ventures, they're making investments, they're doing acquisitions. You know, they're taking it very seriously. And I wish my chief digital officers would be taking it as seriously as chief data, but I just think they're not being impacted by it yet. You know, they're not seeing that real. I think the first real revolution was the Indiegogo and Kickstarter and allowing an independent to go out and self-fund their projects, you know. So I said, well, how do we finance this? And so blockchain offers not only that, you know, the financing, but also the tracking of the content wherever it goes and micropayments. So, you know, while blockchain is too slow to be doing micropayments, you could Hedera, Hashgraph, or other solutions along the distributed ledger technology, this could be the boon for independence that we've been waiting all our lives for, that a musician doesn't have to go off and get a label contract and get ripped off and get indentured servitude. Author doesn't have to go to a major book publisher. Now you can do it yourself, but now you've got an infrastructure to deliver and also to reap the reward. So I have to think that this is like the final piece of the puzzle for independent media. You know, like, could this finally be a way for people to actually get rewarded for the content that they create instead of people just ripping it off and stealing it? So I find it as big as the internet, you know, as big as 1994, 1995, blockchain is bigger than that ever was. That's what we hope that it will be. But I think especially for independence, you know, it couldn't be a better time to be an independent artist, if it all comes together. Yeah. I appreciate you bringing up that book, because when I wrote it, I really thought that all these platforms would be a renaissance of creativity. But what ended up happening was musicians, independent musicians, are not making, they don't have any better of a deal today than they had 10 years ago. So what, they don't have to get a label contract, but now you got to get millions of spins on Pandora just to make pennies. They're still not making any money, right? And photographers who put up a photo on Facebook, it disappears into the ether, you know? There's just so much content out there. So I think hopefully we've finally got a platform now that will allow that renaissance of creativity and allow people to get compensated for their work.